Hello, welcome back to another episode of Into the Unknown. Today we're discussing some legends. This episode and the next episode will be about legends. Since the legends ended this time, it was started for the next 10 episodes as well. So be on the lookout for that coming next week as well. But today we dive into stories about different monsters, different legends and folklore. Are they true? Are they not true? It's for you to decide. We're going to dive into those stories and we're going to see, we can get some facts, and we're going to also see the mysteries and the lore all around those stories. So if you like this, go ahead and get ready, sit down, relax, and enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's step into the unknown.
Friends used to talk about the things we used to do. But until you return, I will be faithful to you. I will be faithful.
The first story dives into the Yuki-onna, a legend in Japanese folklore about almost an entity that appears during snowstorms. It said the Yuki-onna spend their lives hunting humans in the snow. They stayed near the mountain roads and prey on the travelers coming and going, or breaking homes and flash freeze the people living there during the night. While they are killers, Yuki-onna are not entirely cold-blooded. Legends say that they fall in love with their intended prey and let them go free. Some go as far as to marry humans and live happily together. As supernatural spirits never age, however, their husbands inevitably discover their true identities. This revelation usually ends the happy marriage. Yuki-onna is said to prey on travelers lost in the heavy snowstorms that blanket the Japanese mountains in winter. They have a otherworldly beauty with long black hair and dark piercing eyes. Their skin is ageless and as white as snow, but their bodies are cold as ice. A mere touch is enough to give a human a deep, unshakable chill. They feed on life forces, sucking it from the human's mouth with an icy breath that freezes their victims solid. One encounter that gives you a story of the legend, we don't know if it's true or not, but it dives into an elderly man operated an inn on a mountain trail with his wife. One snowy night, the inn was visited by a young lady traveling alone. She warmed herself by the fire and ate with an innkeeper and his wife. She was sweet and charming and extremely beautiful, so it was even more of a surprise when, in the middle of the night during a freezing blizzard, she stood up and made to leave the inn. The innkeeper begged her not to go outside and took her hand to hold her back. It was as cold as ice. Merely touching it sucked all the warmth from the innkeeper's body. As he tried to keep the girl in the house, her entire body turned into a fine icy mist and shot up the chimney and out into the night. Yuki-onna is known, like I mentioned, it's just about the legends, the folklore, a lot of different stories. You see renditions of stuff. Of course, some of this stuff doesn't, when you read it, it doesn't seem like maybe real like that, but you never know. Like there's certain encounters like that with different stories and different legends to dive into. So that's the first story, the Yuki-onna. Now we're going to dive into the next story, which is about the abominable snowman. The abominable snowman had different alliterations of itself, from being a yeti, Bigfoot, all type of things. It's said to be this hairy ape-like creature, that comes in all different shapes and sizes. Sometimes to be taller than a human, like way taller, or sometimes to be maybe around the same height, but extremely strong and powerful and frightening. It said sometimes to have white fur to be able to blend in with the snow, and sometimes to have brown fur to be able to blend in the forest. So it's been seen all around like that, but no one really has seen or caught these things on camera. The closest they ever came to seeing anything or like making a discovery that connects towards it was, of course, footprints. Footprints could be, of course, somebody playing a joke on them, or also could just be them just going out there and actually discovering something that maybe doesn't exist anymore. We've seen animals evolve before in different times like that. So sometimes things happen, and maybe a certain animal like dinosaurs, that don't exist nowadays, but maybe it did exist one day. Maybe that's like the same situation. So we have to dive and see everything about it. But we're going to talk about some encounters that happened with the abominable snowman. One of the first encounters in the 1830s by Brian Hodgson is an early Western account of a wild man in the Himalayas, dates back to 1832, and is given by Brian Hodgson to the court of Nepal's first British resident and the first Englishman permitted to visit this forbidden land. Hodgson had to contend with the hotbed that was instill Nepalese politics. He was particularly interested in the natural history of ethnography of the region, and so his report carries some weight. He recorded this, and the native hunters had been frightened by a wild man. Religion has introduced the Bandar monkey into the central region, where it seems to flourish, have domesticated in the neighborhood of temples in the populous valley of Nepal proper. My shooters were once alarmed in the Kanchar by the apparition of a wild man, possibly an orang, but I doubt their accuracy. They mistook the creature for some type of demon and fled from it instead of shooting it. It moved, they said, erectly, was covered with long dark hair, and had no tail. Another encounter happened back in 1889 in India. It's said by Lawrence Wardell. He says some large footprints in the snow led across our track and away up the higher peaks. These were alleged to be the trail of a hairy wild man who are believed to live among us, the eternal snows, along with the mythical white lions whose roars is erupted to be heard during storms. He said these so-called hairy wild men are evidently the great yellow snow bear, which is highly carnivorous and often kills yaks. Yet, although most of the Tibetans know this bear sufficiently to give it wide berth, they live in such an atmosphere or superstition that they are always ready to find extraordinary and supernatural explanations to uncommon events. Those are a few encounters of the abominable snowman. Now let's dive into our last legend, which is the chupacabra. The chupacabra, in Latin American popular legend, a monstrous creature that attacks animals and consumes their blood. The name is derived from the Spanish words chupar, to suck, and cabra, goat, and can be translated as goat sucker. As a fearsome but probably non-existent creature, the chupacabra has been characterized as the southern equivalent of the Sasquatch. Chupacabras was first reported back in 1995 in Puerto Rico, where they were blamed for attacks on goats, sheep, and other domestic animals, supposedly leaving uneaten carcasses that were drained of blood. Other reports described the creature that stood upright and resembled a large reptilian kangaroo with huge red eyes. No actual specimens were found, and skeptics suggest that witnesses may have been influenced by the Hollywood science fiction horror films Species, which features a monster of similar appearance. But other sightings were reported throughout the Americas and as far as north as the United States. A different type of chupacabra was also reported in many of the same places. These chupacabras were smaller and stood upon 4 feet. They were generally canine in appearance but hairless. Actual specimens were produced, but they were identified by biologists as coyotes, dogs, or canine hybrids. The animals owed their strange appearance to hair loss resulting from mange and an infestation of mites. It was suggested that the canines attacked livestock because the debilitating effects of the infestation put wild prey out of their reach. Since then, the chupacabras stories have been generated throughout time, and people have claimed to see chupacabras and see things that resemble it throughout history. So this right here concludes the final story of our legends. Now let's dive into the outro to conclude the video. That concludes our stories. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, like and subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys on the next episode of Into the Unknown.